update. I'm so excited to be on with you guys. Feel free to use the chat if you have questions or comments as we're going along, but this is going to be a power-packed hour. I'm really excited to share lots of meat and potatoes with you guys today. Oh, good. I got a thumbs up that you guys can see my screen. Awesome. So without further ado, we're going to dive in. So I am fresh back from Mega Camp, which is, for anybody that's not familiar, it is Keller Williams' huge conference that we have in every August, and it was absolutely incredible. Learned so much. And one of the mornings we spent a good solid, probably about 2.5 hours talking about market data and projections. And then I'm going to share some of that with you guys. And then I also got some really awesome, powerful information from Goldman Sachs and Ben Kinney as well, which I'm going to share as well. So we're going to talk about all the good stuff today. And there we go. The whole goal of today is to give you perspective. I always say this, but I just want to, mention it. Perspective is what gives you hope, right? And that's the most important thing for all of us as realtors, is being able to be that source of hope and real information to support your business, but also to support your clients. And so that's my goal today, is just to give you perspective and the real facts about data and what's happening, so that we can all use the past as a predictor for the future and just get clarity to empower ourselves and our clients. And I heard this recently. Well, before I dig into that, actually, I do want to hear from you guys. If you will put in the chat box what's been happening for you in business, what you're seeing in the market right now. I would love to hear if where you're at is slower, busy, normalizing, steady. If you work in a particular pocket, if you're in the Charlotte area, would love to hear anything that you're seeing right now. So put that in the chat box, and then we'll move forward. I know in general, it's been a really interesting market, a little bit of everything. I feel like we've seen a lot of some houses move really quickly, some houses sit. And a lot of, I feel like the market seems to change almost from week to week. So it's been very interesting in my opinion. Let's see. Normalizing. Jen said, I agree with that. We are starting to see more of that seasonality, which we haven't seen in the last 3 years. It's been just a wackadoodle market in the last 3 years. And we are starting to see more of that normalizing and seasonality, which is a shift for a lot of people. So I think that's really interesting for sure. Isn't it all awesome? So I'm in the Lincoln area. Days on market is increasing a lot. So normalizing here, which is a good thing. Yep, totally agree. Buyers don't like competing while the rates are up. That's so true, Natalie. It's just funky for buyers right now, because they're already not happy that the rates are up, and then they still have to be competitive in a lot of situations. So it's definitely been unique for sure. Okay, cool. So I heard this statement from one of my coaches, who's also very well versed in the real estate industry and economy and all that. And I wanted to share it with you because I thought it was really powerful. I guess I should change this. So I don't know if you guys are seeing there. That might make it easier. Okay. So the economy does not dictate your success. It dictates your strategy and how you communicate. And that, I think, is so huge. When I heard that, I was like, dang, the economy doesn't dictate your success. It dictates your strategy and how you communicate to it. So what does that mean? It means that it's all about how we communicate what's going on, not only to ourselves, but to our customers, to our buyers, our sellers, investors, friends, vendors, people in your company. If you have a team, how you communicate to all of those people makes a massive difference. And I think the biggest thing to think about that I've been hearing so much lately that has been on my heart is don't allow the change in the economy that we have right now to be your excuse for bailing on yourself, on your goals, on your business, for taking a back seat. That's just, it's not valid, because yes, the economy is harder, and yes, the market is harder, but there's still business out there to be had, and business is going to be done by you or by someone else. It just means we have to work a little harder and work a little different. But I just want to challenge every single one of you that's on and listening, be the type of human, be the type of person that is the whatever it takes type of human. And I have a feeling you are, because you're on here right now and you don't have to be. So be the type of person that is the whatever it takes person. And let's use this data today to change our strategy where needed and make shifts. Deal? Deal. Okay. So this 2246, I want to review this. I always think this is super important to see. Basically, these are your magic numbers in the economy in general. Know them, memorize them, write them down. This is always what you want to be looking for to understand what's happening in the industry and in the market. So 2246, that means these are our goals. GDP, we want GDP to sit around 2%, inflation to sit around 2%, real estate appreciation 4%, and unemployment below 6%. When we can get everything sitting at this spot, then everything is smooth and good. That is a happy place for our economy. And when it's not, that's when things get out of whack and get funky. So always think 2246, that's what we're looking for. And so it's almost like an interesting thought too, that I personally didn't think of before I educated myself on this stuff, that like, you know, why do we want GDP to be at a certain place, or why do we want any inflation? Oh no, I just stopped the share. Oh gosh. Sorry guys, coming back. You know what? It's all good. Technical difficulties. We can keep on rolling. Hopefully you guys, can you see my screen again? Okay. But anyways, you know, why is it important to have some inflation and not none, right? And so we're going to talk about that today. So these are your numbers you want to really focus on. We're going to focus first today on GDP. So let's dive into that. And I'm going to move this little guy. Maybe I'll move it over here so you guys can see. I don't know if you can see these squares or not. Okay, that'll be fine. GDP. So this is your annual GDP definition of a recession. Now, of course, you'll see this is year to year. So the years are at the bottom. So you'll see we're 2023, our GDP is at 1. If you remember, the goal is 2. If you look at the quarterly right here, in the first 2 quarters of 2022 was when we had the last time we had negative GDP numbers. And that's technically the definition of a recession. The definition of a recession is 2 quarters with back-to-back negative GDP. So technically we have been in the positive ever since. That's just good perspective to share. But with that being said, what I feel like it's really important to talk about just generally GDP, because what we're looking at when we look at GDP is basically we're looking for, is the economy growing or contracting? Fluctuations in the economy, of course, represent opportunities for all of us. When there's changes, it opens up the door for us to get ahead of the competition. Overall, GDP is the measurement of goods and services consumed by a country minus the difference between imports. So think of it like the measurement of value added. So when we're in the negative, that means the measurement of goods and services consumed is less than what we're importing, and vice versa. So we always want GDP overall to grow on an annual basis. And that's because when GDP grows, that's an indicator that businesses are improving. We want our homes that we own to be worth more, right? You don't want to buy a home for $400,000, it'd be worth $390,000 the next year. And we want to be able to pay employees more and more overtime and keep up with natural inflation. So that's why this is important. But at the same time, you don't want GDP to grow too fast, which is the tricky part. And that's really the last few years, that's exactly what happened. So if you've ever sat and been like, why does this GDP number matter? Why, like, how does this affect in the real estate industry so much? It's because of almost like too fast of growth. So if you think back to the pandemic, let me let these people in from the waiting room. Awesome. Think back from the pandemic, the government dumped literally $4.5 trillion into the economy. And basically, we spent it, right? We did what every good American would do, which is we bought a bunch of stuff that we didn't need, right? Some of it, maybe we did invest or, you know, pay off debt or do other things, but we've also bought a bunch of stuff like cars and purses and vacations and whatever. And that caused our economy to grow like crazy, which is what accelerated what we see now. Okay. So that's why this is important. So this huge spike here, that is what has really kind of caused the rest of what we're going to see. Oops. Here we go. Real GDP growth in the second quarter of 2023 accelerated to 2.4% at an annual rate, picking up from a 2% gain in the first quarter. So that basically means that even with the Fed increasing interest rates like they've been doing, basically trying to make things more expensive to slow spending, the economy still grew. That's technically a problem, which is interesting, right? Like, I'd be like, oh, wow, we still grew. But technically it's a problem because the government was trying to slow down growth to control inflation, and it didn't exactly all work out. So there are some really great, this is the quarterly slide I just showed you guys a minute ago. So we are, the positive here is that we are sitting around that magic number of 2 for GDP, right? This was Q1 2023, Q2 2023. So we're right around the 2s, which is a good thing that things are normalizing, but it's just kind of been a rocky ride, right? So this is global growth from Goldman Sachs. So global growth is expected to slow to below trend levels. You'll see we're sitting right at the 2s. The Euro area, 0.5 to 0.6 in GDP growth. Japan sitting in the 1s. UK, China, 5.4% growth. And Russia's in the negative. So overall, they expect all of the global trends to be below as well, or slow. But it's really good to see kind of where we're at in there. So this, let me move this. I don't know why I have my slides arranged. I cannot read them. Let me move it back over there. Okay. So these 2 little graphs show you slower bank lending to weigh in on GDP growth. Basically, what it's talking about is the effects of banks not giving loans, and because they're not giving as many loans, which of course we want healthy lending practices, right? And at the same time, the fact that they are not giving out as many loans, it puts more pressure on the GDP and slows things down. So, but even in spite of that, we have a pretty optimistic outlook for the next quarter, and things could be worse. Things could be worse. So that's the positive in this is GDP, even though, you know, inflation has been high and rates have been high, GDP is not in the tank. It's staying relatively steady. And these are just some of the factors that's affecting all of that. So that's a little picture of GDP, and click. Thank you. There we go. Let's talk a little bit about inflation. So remember, if you guys remember from the thing I showed you guys earlier, the goal for inflation is 2%. So you'll see annual inflation here. This is where we are right now. So 2.5%, projected 2.3%. So again, we're right at kind of where you want to be with inflation almost. And here's one thing I think is important and good to know about with inflation that I never thought about before, which is that, you know, a little inflation is expected and may even considered healthy, which is why the goal is to always be at 2%, right? If you never had any inflation, then it basically would mean no businesses ever grew, nobody was ever able to pay people more, no home values ever grew. So you just want to have that nice healthy inflation versus this yucky spike that we see. So again, we are just starting to normalize that a little bit. Now this is just monthly, showing you the breakdown for the whole year. So you'll see kind of like where we're sitting. The blue and the orange line, the blue line excludes energy and food, and the orange line includes energy and food, which in my opinion, the orange line, like that's really where we all feel it most, right? Because that's where you're gonna, you know, when inflation goes up, we're all feeling it in the gas tank, in the grocery bill, and that's what you're gonna see in that orange line. So overall for the year, 2.5% for the year, projecting 2.3% overall. We're a little bit closer in the 3s with inflation for the month of July. Now, I wanted to show you something really interesting, I found interesting on this slide right here. And this is talking about inflation over time. So what I want you guys to look at is this one over here. So US market rents and PCE housing services. Here's what's really interesting that I think anybody that has an investor client that works with renters, if you personally work with renters or anything of the such, this is really, or generally if you're working with people that are first-time home buyers, et cetera, really great information. Look at this green line right here. This green line is the Zillow Observed Rent Index. Okay, so you'll see with that green line, 2021 rents skyrocketed, which we all know, we all have seen it. Like rents went bananas. And then what's interesting is that rental rates are actually going back down and normalizing again. So that's interesting news. However, on the flip side, the blue line you see is the home price index, and that's continuing to climb. So meaning when people are waiting to rent or like continuing to rent and waiting to buy, home prices are continuing to go up, and rental rates are not going to be at the same spike as they always were. So that I thought was very interesting. And here's something I wanted to share that a lot of experts are recommending when it comes to this. So experts suggest if you have tenants, a client has tenants, whoever, if you have tenants, you actually may be better off right now locking in a flat rate rent with your tenants now for an extended period of time, so as not to have as much vacancy down the road. That actually may be a better scenario versus trying to bump the rent up over the next year. So typically, you know this, if you have renters or if you have a client that has renters, a lot of times with rent, right, you might start at this rate and then bump it up every 6 months or once a year. The rental rates will gradually increase. With how things are trending right now, experts are suggesting that rather than raising that rent over time, it may be advantageous of you to keep a flat rent but lock it in for 12, 24, or 36 months for the stability of rental income and the stability of not having vacancy, which of course, having a vacancy in your rental is the most costly situation ever. So I thought that was really interesting advice from experts. So if you have any investor clients, that is something to discuss with them and make sure they are aware about the home prices versus how Zillow rent index and what might be a good solution for them. So that's just one idea. Okay, so next slide. This is from Goldman Sachs, their forecast for Q4 of 2023. So as you can see, it says we expect inflation to moderate but remain at elevated levels in 2023. So 3.1 to 2.8% inflation is about what they're predicting for the US. You'll see how it correlates to other countries. So just good knowledge to have. It's projected to kind of hang out right there. Okay, so let's talk about unemployment. That's definitely the next order of business today, unemployment. Now, if you remember from the 2246 that we talked about earlier, the goal for unemployment is to be below 6%. So as you can see right here, 2022, I mean, we've been below 6% for a while. US job growth, let me show you that really quick. So that's our unemployment rate. This is unemployment monthly. So you can see what that's looked like. Of course, it's just sat right there in the threes for quite a while, which is a good thing. And also I'm going to mention something that is important to keep in mind with that as well. So US job growth moderated in June while wage growth remained firm, showing a strong enough labor market to keep the Federal Reserve on track to raise interest rates this month. So that's important to keep in mind. To go along with that, something I think is important to know is to keep in mind, you look at wage growth versus unemployment and job openings data. So one thing that's important to know is that they calculate the unemployment rate. When they calculate that, they're only calculating people that are currently looking for a job. And they do not take into consideration self-employed people or 1099 contractors, such as many of us are. So that's a really interesting piece of that pie to just keep in mind. There's actually a larger base of people who are not seen in these numbers. And that just is what it is, but just good to know. Wage growth, you'll see as well over time. This is you'll see the wage growth indicators right here, how it's like shot up and is going back down. So this is indicating what happened in 2020 again, right? Remember, nobody would work and nobody could get anybody hired. And so they were paying tons of bonuses and high wages for jobs just because they really couldn't get anybody in them. And what's interesting is that's actually starting to drop back down because businesses are not having to pay the high rate to get employees like they did in 2020 when nobody was willing to work. So that's just an interesting thing to pay attention to. That is definitely a new thing. So that's what's happening with inflation and the risks that we could be looking at there. Now, with that being said, let's talk a little bit about interest rates. I know we all want to talk about interest rates, and so we're going to dig into it today. So this slide obviously says during the latest FOMC meeting, which FOMC stands for Federal Open Market Committee. So it's talking about the Fed, the Federal Reserve, all that. During the latest FOMC meeting in July, interest rates rose by 25 basis points to 5.25 to 5.5%. Now 100 basis points is 1%. So it's basically like it rose 0.25%. And it says the 11th such hike in this cycle. There was a brief pause in June. It's intended to slow down inflation. Now, just to clarify, this is the amount of money that the Fed is willing to lend to the banks so that the banks can lend to us. So this is not the rate that we pay. This is the rate that the banks are paying the Fed, okay, which affects the rates that we then pay. Does that make sense? So what I think is really interesting and important to think about, to give you a little perspective around interest rates. Interest rates is what the Federal Reserve uses as their one lever that they can pull to speed up or slow growth in our economy. So everything kind of sits around interest rates. And here's something that is a really powerful nugget that can empower you with perspective and with helping your clients. For every 1% that interest rates go up, it costs your clients 10% in their monthly payment if they're financing. So just burn that in your brain. 1%, 10%. For every 1% that interest rates go up, it costs your client 10% on their monthly payment. So for example, when loans went from, around 3% to the mid 7%, that's a 4% increase for us with interest rates, but it's a 40% increase in a monthly payment, which is why so many people are expressing concerns over moving at this time. And that's why it feels like a challenge. It's not just, yes, it's a fact that when you look at inflation, we're technically not outside the trend line of like average, right? 6-7% is really an average interest rate for historical averages. However, when somebody goes 4% up, now they're looking at a 40% increase in their payment. It's dramatically changed what they can afford. So at the same time, I think it's really important to keep in mind too, that rates are not going back to 3%, right? They're just not. And what we're experiencing right now is the public really is in a shock moment and has been for a while. I heard a great analogy of this actually from Ben Kinney about zombies. So I could relate. So if you've ever seen The Walking Dead, think about it like that, right? So the first episode of The Walking Dead, you saw zombies and it was like, oh my gosh, like it was terrifying. Everybody hid in their house. Nobody knew what to do. By the time you got to like the 4th, 5th season of The Walking Dead, they were just walking around with axes and baseball bats and like just chopping off down zombies and moving on, right? And so if you think about it like that, that's kind of the goal right now, is to get our clients and the public out of that first season zombie shock mode to normalcy, because the reality is that rates are not going to go back to where they were, right? 2 and 3%. Interest rates are relatively going to start normalizing. And so over the next, I would say 12 to 18 months, we're going to see people starting to come out of that shock mode and adjust a little bit. So just a little perspective for you around that. Now, this is direct from Goldman Sachs, what they are predicting for interest rates. So Goldman Sachs said, we expect that rate hike to be the last of the cycle, but on a probability basis, our Fed views remain more hawkish than market pricing. This reflects both our lower probability of recession and our expectation that the threshold for rate cuts will be fairly high and cuts will be gradual. We expect interest rate cuts, to start in 2024 Q2, to proceed at 25 basis points per quarter and to end with the funds at 3 to 3.25% above the FOMC's 2.5% longer run. Remember those percentages, It's not the public, what they're paying. It's what the rate the banks are paying to the feds. So we would see something higher than that. I would guesstimate, the fives and low sixes, but high fives is what that kind of translates to. Remember, this is not guaranteed. Nobody has a crystal ball. It's really a 50-50 chance when any economic expert makes predictions, but it's really good to know this is an educated guess from the experts of what we will likely see. So, we could still see rates continue to go higher, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. We have, a few quarters of hard ahead of us as things are not going to go down immediately, but we can do hard, right? And when you really focus on what your strategy is to get through the harder season, it's going to get better on the other side. So just know that there's light at the end of the tunnel and it's coming. Okay, so let's talk about commercial real estate. I hope this is helpful for you guys. By the way, feel free to put in the chat if you do have any questions or whatever. But commercial real estate is not something that we've talked about before. And so hopefully this will be helpful for you if you know anybody in commercial real estate or clients, or you yourself are. So the interesting thing about commercial real estate in general is, did you know that there's roughly 22 trillion with a T dollars out on commercial real estate loans in the US? Woo! 22 trillion. And the vast majority of commercial loans are 5, 7, or 10-year loans. So basically they come up for renewal and renew. So the majority of commercial loans, 5, 7, or 10-year loans, and they come up for renewal and reset based on the new rate at the end of the 5, 7, or 10-year period. So right now there's about $2 trillion worth of loans for commercial real estate coming up for renewal in the next 12 to 18 months that will need to be refinanced. This is super important to be aware of, because that's going to be a huge impact. Think about those 4% rates that they have on a lot of those commercial loans having to go up back in and refinance at 7 to 8%. It is indicating potentially lots of commercial real estate going into default or being dumped back on the market. So that is really important to be aware of. Stress in the commercial real estate market is reflected in the performance of those real estate assets. And it's going to be a really interesting time. I mean, what that really is, if you think about it, think about the time that we have been in and where we're at and why it's such a challenge, because not only are rates going to be higher, but also people are paying rent for buildings that employees won't go back to. Right? Which that's really the biggest issue with commercial, which is super important to be aware of, is the biggest issues, the low cap rates. And the fact that it's not just like, oh no, we don't want to pay more. It's like the new rates just don't make sense. I actually heard from a resource talking about Brookfield, which is one of the largest mall owners in America. They actually gave back 2 of their holdings, and because it just ended up not making sense. Like, do we take a loss or do we give it back? Well, they gave it back because their stock went up. And oops, sorry, I've had to admit someone. So they gave it back because they were basically saving $60 million per year by giving those properties back to the bank, and actually made their stock go up. So that's the situation that a lot of people are looking at in the commercial world. Super important to be aware of. So when is that commercial expected to happen? Commercial real estate. So basically, great question, Stephanie. So it's there's about $2 trillion worth of loans that are, it depends on each month really, right? Like when did they finance originally, but it's every 5, 7, and 10 years. So it's just basically saying over the next 12 to 18 months, you'll see that trickle happen, but it'll be a big trickle of $2 trillion worth of loans that have to be redone. So that is definitely going to be something that you want your commercial clients to be aware of, you to be aware of, and when you're thinking about the commercial world in general. Okay. Now this slide actually is talking about overall GDP globally. The great thing that you'll see here is the United States is strong overall. compared to other countries, which is a great thing, right? In spite of all the risks and challenges that we have experienced in the last year, in the last 3 years, we still have the most amount of GDP, the most amount of GDP per person, and the top universities and Nobel laureates means most award-winning people. So that is a really big deal. I just love that, to see that, in that we can have confidence in the country, in our country that we're doing business in, that we're growing in. It's the best place to be for the most opportunity. And over time, we will see it all work out. So that I thought was really encouraging. So just good perspective to have. So let's talk a little bit about home sales. Now that we've looked at the economy, let's talk about those houses. So this is home sales annually. So of course, this is where we're at, about 4.3 million homes sold for 2023 so far. We are down 17% year over year, but we do remain relatively steady month to month. So if you look at the home sales monthly for the year, now purple, this was 2022. So you can see in 2022, it was just a decline the whole year. Home sales were just dropping. This year, which is this teal color, we really are starting to steady out again, which is a good thing, that home sales are not quite as volatile, although they're still lower, right? It's not quite as volatile. And when we think about that, okay, 17% less homes, how do I make up for that? Like if there's literally less business to get out in the market, what do I do? And the biggest thing that I know all top producers, most top producers are focusing on right now in order to continue to win, to continue to take market share, is the reality that you win in this market by outpacing the decline of the market with activities. Meaning, if your business, let's say your business is down 20% personally year over year, then that means you need to do 20% more in order to make up for it. If you have a team, who can you hire that is going to help bring in 20% more business? If you're an individual agent, this means 20% more open houses, 20% more time connecting with your sphere, 20% more time lead generating, 20% more listing appointments. That's not what people want to hear. I know, like, we all want to hear, like, it will be lovely, here's the magic pill, and your business will be great. But the fact of the industry is that you outpace the decline in the market with your activities. So empower yourself with that, because we all can control our activities. We don't need anything special. We just need the work ethic to focus on what we can control, which is doing the work. And that's what most top producers are doing. So I find that very encouraging personally. Is this based on the local market? Just double checking. No, we're talking about national numbers, Lourdes. So these are not global, national numbers. Okay, so home prices annually, great thing to see here. What you're looking at is from 1990 to now, what home prices have looked like. The blue, this like teal line right here, this is the trend line, meaning if you just go with economic trends, then that line is basically where prices should be, if that makes sense, should be based on GDP, inflation, and a regular home value appreciation. So the trend line says we should be at about 357,000 as an average price point for a home in 2023 in America. We are at 382,000 as our average. So we're 7% above the trend line, which I find encouraging that it's not as exorbitant as it feels. Now, why does it feel exorbitant? Because the interest rates are high right now, right? Remember that 1% versus 10% rule with your clients. So they're feeling it. Your clients are feeling it when they're financing, because their payment is a lot higher right now. Although the actual home prices are not grossly overpriced when you look at the actual reality of the data. So that's just really good perspective to have. I find that encouraging to know that, like, okay, we're relatively on pace for where we should be. Now, the other thing that's great to know, 42% of homes are off the market in 2 weeks. This is from Goldman Sachs and Redfin. And what does this mean? It means that good priced homes sell fast, and overpriced homes in this market are going to sit on the market endlessly. I feel so strongly, I'm sure a lot of you guys do too, there is not anything more important right now when you're listing properties than to make sure you're listing it appropriately. And what's the reality right now is that if you go look at comparables, what a comp was 6 months ago may not even be what you can rely on now, right? Because things have changed dramatically. And if there's anything I could recommend, it is price low and attract more showings and more buyers and more potential rather than pricing high. Because if you price it high, it is going to sit, and that's never a good thing for you or the client. So 42% of homes are off market in 2 weeks. All right, so let's talk a little bit about inventory. So with inventory monthly, you can see we are currently at 3 months of supply nationwide. So that's what you're looking at. It's not that much different from last year, 2.9%. So you'll see inventory is relatively just kind of been kind of stuck. These are projections, of course, over here. A lot of that is because of underbuilding. We have an underbuilding. Chief economist at Freddie Mac said we have an underbuilding of almost 4 million homes. So that takes a minute to catch up for sure. Luckily, we are seeing more builder confidence show up, meaning more new construction homes are happening and starting to pick up pace. That's not going to solve the problem though. So we're going to be looking at low inventory for probably quite a while. All right, mortgage rates. Mortgage rates. Okay, you'll see we're sitting at 6.6% is the average mortgage rate right now. So historical average is from 90 to 21 is 5.97. Since 72, the average is 7.81. So of course, I think what's super important again is just to be aware of that. Like we talked about that earlier on as well, that things are going to probably start to normalize and sit right around those high fives, low sixes. That's what we're seeing here as well. Speaking of mortgages, I want to talk a little bit about this because it's just really important perspective to have as you're having conversations with buyers and sellers and just why things are sitting how they are. So this graph is just basically showing what interest rate percentage most mortgages are. And so you'll see you've got 3% or less, 32% of mortgages out there have a 3% or less interest rate. 3 to 3.5 is 27%. And then you've got the 4s and the 5s and the 4.5, 5, so on and so forth over here. So 89% of mortgages, 89% have rates of 5% or less. Of course, that is something that is a challenge for sellers. We're going to talk about how to have conversations with sellers and strategies with sellers here in just a little bit. So perspective for you, and we're going to talk through what to do about that. Let's talk a little bit about homeowner equity. Last month, go back and grab the playback from last month if you haven't seen it. I talked a lot about homeowner equity, and this is actually a huge reason why we're not looking at any type of situation like 2008, because there is a massive amount of equity in the market, which means even if home values change, like if anything like crazy were to happen, people have enough equity in their home that they would not be upside down in their mortgage, and it really wouldn't be the same situation. So 87 million homeowners own their home, or hold on. Yeah, there's 87 million overall homeowners. Make sure I said that right. 87 million overall homeowners in the United States. Out of that 87 million, 39% own their home outright, meaning no mortgage. They bought it in cash or they've paid their mortgage off. That's 34 million people. Good for them. That's amazing. There's also another 31%, another 27 million homeowners that have more than 50% equity in their home. So that means that 70% of homeowners have at least 50% equity in their home, y'all. Shut the front door. 70%. This is why our whole industry is in a great spot right now, because number one, people have equity, they have security. It's over $27 trillion in equity right now that's sitting in our market. So it's also a challenge, right, as to why people are not necessarily selling, because they have a low interest rate and they have equity and they're comfortable. However, if anything were to go the opposite way in our economy, that is a major piece of security in the industry, that people will not be upside down in their mortgages. Now, something else I wanted to mention about this is millennials. So raise your hand if you're a millennial. Whoop, whoop, in the house. If you were born from 1981 to 1996, you're a millennial. I watched a TikTok the other day where somebody was calling a millennial like somebody that's in college right now. And I'm like, no, we're old now. Millennials are old. But anyways, here's a great thing to know about millennials. That's great for our industry and great for you for perspective. It's the largest generation since baby boomers. In the next 5 years, all millennials will be in the age range of 32 plus, the 32 plus and up. That means it will likely be in the next 5 years that we're going to see a huge time for home purchasing. That is the sweet spot of age where a lot of people, if they haven't already bought their first home, they'll be hitting their peak earning years. So we should see a huge boom in the industry in the next 5 years just because of that one factor alone. So really great to know. There's also, it's not in my notes, but I don't know if you guys have heard also, there's coming the largest transfer of wealth also because of baby boomers passing away and leaving their money to millennials and so on. So just really good to know for preparation. So let's talk a little bit about sphere conversations and what that might look like. Okay. So sphere conversations, there's three focuses really I want to focus on with you guys today. What to say to your sphere right now in order to help them win, what to say to buyers, and what to say to sellers. There's 3 strategies. So as far as sphere goes, I think the biggest thing that I'm hearing from most top producers and conversations I'm having and from experts in the industry is that we need to be driving conversations and getting face-to-face. The virtual connection is the virtual connection. It is what it is, but that's not going to be the driver that is going to cement you with your sphere. The face-to-face conversations, the connections that are meaningful is what it's going to be all about. So here's the thing to be really mindful of. And this is why I love doing these industry updates and empowering all of us with perspective, because people watch the news, right? That's where people are getting their information is they turn on the TV or they look at social media, and that's where they're getting their knowledge from. And guess what? All of that is negative because negativity is what gets the eyeballs, unfortunately, right? That's what gets the ratings. That's what gets clicked on. And that's what they talk about. And then that is what people are basing their decisions on. And so the news cycle is just not going to be anybody's friend. And unfortunately, it's not reality. You are the economist of choice. That is your mission. That's why you're on this Zoom right now, is to empower yourself to be the economist of choice and to be educated for yourself and for the people around you. Your job is to get out there and help educate, help people, help them make the best decision possible with the actual facts. So I want you to think about it that your sphere, it's your responsibility and your duty to give them the facts and help them translate how those facts impact them, right? Like, how would you feel if you were on the other side and you were thinking about buying a house, but you watched the news and went on Facebook and heard all these scary stories? There's going to be a crash. There's going to be a this, there's going to be a that. Homes are overpriced, blah, 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 all the things. And so then you didn't make a decision that would help set you up for success in the future when your realtor friend could have supported you and informed you in a powerful way. That's our job. So don't be the ostrich. Don't pretend like it's not happening, because people are getting their information somewhere and they're not getting it from the best sources. And I also want to say, when it comes to talking to your sphere, in the last year, well, not even the last year, the last 3 years, it is just a fact that the industry has been so different, right? Business was falling out of the sky into our laps. You were really able to just receive business and do business. And that's not the case right now. If overall available transactions are down, it doesn't mean that the industry is, going to go kaboom. It means that you have to skill up in order to take business and take market share. And you can do that. You're in control of that. I heard a statistic recently that said, on average, real estate agents are talking to about 3 people a week in proactive conversations. That is abysmal. Like, that is why a lot of people are going to leave the industry. A lot of people are not going to make the money that they want to make because they're having 3 conversations a week. And that's just not the level of activity and relationship building it takes to build a successful real estate business that sustains throughout different economies and different shifts. And it's nobody's fault necessarily, right? Nobody had to have more conversations in the last 3 years. So really that's just a result of the last 3 years, but that's not where we are now. It's not where we are now. So it's fine if you're like, yeah, that was me. It was a good week if I talked to 3 people. That's fine. But this is a new day and a new time. And let's make a different choice moving forward to empower yourself, because the business is going to happen. It can happen with somebody else or with you, right? So I really think it's a great opportunity right now with your sphere to just reach out with this type of a dialogue. So if you were to just reach out and say, hey, I know a lot is happening right now in the industry, in the market. You probably have a lot of questions if you've seen the news or anything on social media lately. I thought it would be a great time to get together to talk about the market and about your real estate related plans and what they are for the future. Let's plan your strategy for the next 1, 2, or 3 years. So what you're not doing is reaching out to people in your life and being like, hey, do you want to buy? Hey, do you want to sell? This is the time. Buy now. Sell now. No, none of us want to be salesy. None of us want to be that way to any person in our life, and you don't have to be. This dialogue is simply you just showing up to serve and truly showing up to support people around you. Let's plan your strategy for the next 1, 2, or 3 years. What are your real estate related plans for the future? And hear what people have to say. And then it's just an opportunity for you to have conversation. Remember your goal with your sphere. Most people, according to NAR, most people know about 7 realtors, and when they get ready to buy or sell, are only going to call 1 out of 7. So just because you know them doesn't mean they're going to call you, right? So this is your job right now to cement the loyalty with your sphere, have the conversations. If you were to do nothing else, I would recommend, if you're using Command, which is Keller Williams CRM, use the monthly neighborhood nurture. It is so powerful and will put you in front of your people regularly with value that they want, and that's helpful. You want to just make sure that you're the person that they refer business to and that they call when they have a need. Okay, so let's talk about buyer conversations. So the biggest thing with buyer conversations right now, I think, is to really help your buyers with perspective. So let's talk about what that looks like. What you really want to think about is, how are you helping them focus on the benefits of home ownership? Not necessarily focusing all on interest rates, but let's talk about the payment that your family can afford. Let's talk about the economic value and benefits of home ownership. So obviously home value appreciation, paying their mortgage off instead of their landlord's mortgage off, and the equity that then would benefit their family. Talking about the tax benefits, the ability to rent it out over time and build rental income and passive income. These are all huge benefits for buying now, and especially just even helping someone figure out whether they know they want to buy or not right now. Let's figure out how much you can afford, because I love this statement at the bottom. This is a really great statement to talk about with your potential buyers. Right now you have 2 options, because the objection really is, I'm going to wait for interest rates to go down, right? Or I'm going to wait for home prices to go down. So we all know home prices are not going to go down. They might steady out, but they're not going to go down. They're going to continue to appreciate. So you have 2 options: wait for rates to drop and pay more for housing, because a year from now, that same house is going to be more expensive, even though you have a lower interest rate, right? Or pay more on a payment now and get that home at a discount, because it's going to be more expensive a year from now. Of course, I always do love that, depending on obviously each buyer's situation, the adjustable rate mortgages can be a great scenario for that too, right? Like, can you pay a higher interest rate, higher payment for a shorter amount of time, and in a year from now refinance? Is always a great thing to think about too. So that last statement is the one I would take a screenshot, cement that statement right there in your brain. You have 2 options: wait for rates to drop and pay more for housing, or pay more on a payment and get a home at a discount. That's really where we're at. Which one's better for you? Which one, right? Offer your clients choices. Let's talk about seller conversations. This is the last piece, and then we're going to wrap it up. We're in the home stretch. So the most important thing I want you to think about with seller conversations and the general seller strategy right now is honest, transparent conversations. Think about showing up to serve. I'm here to help you when you're ready, and I want to be able to answer your questions. So that when you are ready, I want you to trust that I'm the one that's going to be able to get the job done for you. So here's the strategy that we want to focus on with sellers. Like I said, honest, transparent conversations, and lots of them. 3 conversations a week is not going to cut it. lots and lots of conversations, because there are still people that are going to be ready to move and will move. You just have to find them. One thing that I would recommend that you do to help with the process of finding ready sellers is gamify it. Make it fun. How many quality conversations can you have each day with people about what you're good at, which is real estate? It's what you're knowledgeable about. Do something every day. Think about, like, you know, if you're playing a video game and like every time you play, you can like do something to improve like your, I don't know what, I don't play that many video games, but like your health score or get an extra life. I don't know. I haven't played Mario Brothers in a while, but the point is, think about that. When you wake up every day, what am I doing today that improves my business daily? It's conversations. How many more conversations can you have? That doesn't have to mean hitting the phones. It can mean hitting the phones, but it also can mean connecting with people in your community, talking to people at the coffee shop, being open for conversations everywhere you go. Those all count and make a difference. And they make a difference even more, by the way, if you get their contact info. So the next is focus on change in lifestyle, people. So we talked about this a little bit last month, but this is huge. The number one reason why people are selling right now is for a change in lifestyle, right? The time is over that people are selling because they want to, just for fun, right? Because interest rates and home prices, blah, blah, blah. So look for change in lifestyle. That's the people that you want to find when you're having these conversations. What are the change in lifestyle? It's the 5 Ds. So you can write this down: diapers, divorce, death, downsizing, debt. Those are typically the 5 changes in lifestyles that will make somebody sell right now. Okay. It's all about context.
Can you repeat those?
Help them, like, even if they have a lower rate. And I'll actually use, I have some friends that just moved to Florida, and they actually, their house sat on the market for a while. And for a while they were like, I don't know, like they were kind of moving because they wanted to, they didn't necessarily have to. And then something changed with their situation where it was like, nope, we have to move, change in lifestyle. They had to make it was like a job change. And that changed everything. They sold, they were motivated, and the dots connected. Do you know what I mean? Like they were willing to negotiate with the buyer because of that, et cetera. And so think about that. Who is having a change in lifestyle right now? Oh, can I repeat
those?
What was that? Okay, just make sure you're muted. I don't know. I don't know who that was.
No, I was saying, can you repeat what you just said?
Yes. Yep. I sure can. So the change in lifestyle categories that you want to look for right now: diapers, divorce, death, downsizing, debt. Diapers, divorce, death, downsizing, debt. Those are the things that will make someone sell regardless. You're welcome. Absolutely. Okay. The next piece of strategy is, oh, I also wanted to mention this with change in lifestyle too. And I guess it goes with increasing touches too. Increasing touches means talking to, if you have people in your database that are potential sellers, how many times are they hearing from you? I would highly recommend increasing it. So generally speaking, we recommend 36 touches to convert. Most top producers that I'm talking to these days, it's more like double that is the amount of touches that their database is receiving on a yearly basis. So like 60 to 70 to convert. So make sure you're focusing on that and increasing your touches. The other thing I wanted to mention about that change in lifestyle is 39% of homeowners right now are in the 6 to 10 year mark of home ownership, which is the ideal time for a ready seller. Typically, once they get in that 6 to 10 year window, that's, besides like having to move, that is the time that people start thinking about it otherwise. The next piece of this: perfect your listing appointment and listing packet, including data and statistics. This is something nobody really had to do the last several years. Again, remember, business was like kind of falling into our laps and you kind of would just show up and list the house, right? And that's just not the case anymore, partially because there's more competition, right? There's more people are competing for the same business. And also, sellers are a little bit more discerning. It's just a different atmosphere. So, being prepared with a rock solid listing presentation with and being crystal clear on your value, like what value are you bringing to the client besides putting their home on the MLS, that needs to be crystal clear that you can confidently communicate, and then include statistics and data that back up what you're talking to them about. Those are very important resources. I would recommend some of the slides that were on here would be great ones to screenshot and print out, or I can send the slides out as well and just print them out and laminate them and put them in your listing presentation. Because again, you're giving your clients perspective and you're competing against the news cycle and social media and everything else. And so you can't just show up with opinion, right? So, and then the last piece is Command, the monthly neighborhood nurture. If you're not using the monthly neighborhood nurture feature in Command, like, stop what you're doing today and do that, or find someone to do it for you, because it's probably the one thing that I would say everybody needs to be using beyond anything else is that monthly neighborhood nurture. Like, get every single person in your database on it. I know that if you have a lot of people in your database, that might take a minute, but it is hugely, hugely effective. And it's the number one thing that the public is saying that they want to receive from realtors is communication around what's selling in their neighborhood and for how much. The really big benefit with that too is that that is what's getting them off of other search sites. The recent home sale is the number one thing they want to see, and they're getting it in an email from you every single time a home comes on the market and sells in their neighborhood. It's keeping them with you and connected to you, instead of on another site where they can be, picked up by 8 other agents in 3 seconds. So that would be the other big piece of recommendation I would give you guys for that. And that is everything that I have for you guys today. Woo, we did it, 12:01. So I'm going to give you guys 2 minutes to share ahas, takeaways, or if you want to ask a question, I'm here for that as well. So anything you guys want to share? Takeaways, anything that was helpful or that you'd like me to focus more on, let me know. Any questions? You're welcome. Can I send out the slides? Yes, I can definitely email out the slides, and I'll email the playback too. Yep, you're welcome. Hope it was super helpful for you guys. Awesome. Okay, slides will be sent, and I hope this is helpful. I'll look forward to talking with you guys all soon. Hey, have a great Monday. And remember, the economy does not dictate your business. You do. So wrap your hands around your strategy, empower yourself, and let's go kick some butt. All right, see you later. Bye.